Hi, this is Matt, developer of Streets of Rogue 2, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. So the question on everyone's minds, the elephant in the room, where is the game? Well, I'm going to give you a short answer and I'm going to give you a long answer. Short answer is it's not ready yet. I'm working on it. Despite my best efforts, early access will not be out in 2024. There's no official release date yet, and in keeping in line with my most recent stance on the matter, we won't be announcing a release date until we're 100% sure we can hit that release date. I've just released a very detailed roadmap, which should be linked below the video. Long answer, well, if you've been following my updates on Steam and Discord and watching the trailers and stuff, you might be aware that the game's early access launch was intended to be in August of this year. And then in July, that launch was delayed until October. And then in October, the release date changed to when it's ready. And I also released an early alpha demo of the game around that time. So how and why did a delay of this nature happen? Well, to start off, if you weren't aware, I do all the programming on this game, and in the world of programming, it can be notoriously difficult to predict how long something's going to take. Something that seems relatively simple or straightforward on the surface might end up having a lot of little quirks and interactions with other systems that you didn't anticipate. And that's particularly true of a game that's trying to offer a lot of freedom and emergent gameplay. Case in point, I just added full gamepad support to Streets of Rogue 2, which you can check out in the current version of the demo that's out right now. That took at least twice as long to complete as I thought it would. And the thinking behind that was, it'd take me less than a day to hack in partial gamepad support for the demo after a lot of players had requested it. And full gamepad support would mainly involve letting the player make use of a few additional types of menus. And I already had a bunch of infrastructure in place to support that, so no big deal, right? Well, although the broad strokes of gamepad support weren't hard or time-consuming to add, I also ran into a seemingly never-ending series of edge cases, little design issues, and just little things that needed to be taken care of so that the player would have a good experience. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, devil's in the details, and the bulk of my time during my day-to-day work isn't spent dealing with major game-changer systems and big design problems for the most part. It's spent making lots and lots of little alterations that don't typically make for an exciting changelog, but they do add up. And my experience with gamepad support is actually a pretty good small-scale representation of what's gone on with the game on a broad scale and why it's taking so long. Streets of Rogue 2 was officially announced first in late 2022 alongside a couple of screenshots. And at that point, I've been working on the game for a couple of years, just building off of my work on the first game. There's still a lot to be done, but a bunch of big new systems that I've been working on, like the world streaming and anything to do with vehicles, were in pretty good shape. And the moment-to-moment gameplay was pretty functional. And so at this point, I was thinking, optimistically, maybe a late 2023 early access release was doable, though I wouldn't have necessarily bet on it. And the first real marketing for Streets of Rogue 2 started in late summer of 2023. And if you look at the screenshots and the trailers from around that time, you can see why I might be optimistic about being able to release the game within that next year. Aesthetically, things were in great shape. A lot of the core systems were working really well. The game essentially functioned as like a fun sandbox. So I figured, a year was a good amount of time to kind of whittle things down and hone the game into something more structured. And at that point, I also had a whole bunch of design docs, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do to get the game where it needed to be for an early access launch. So looking back over my change logs, here's a little speed run of what I worked on over the past year. Quest generation, beaches and ocean generation, beach, city, and dock placement, forest generation, ponds, rivers, dirt pads, world generation work, a system for placing crafting materials out into the world, time advancement, player sleep, player death, new NPC knockout functionality, elite NPC functionality, the whole system for hiring NPCs that work at your home base, the tutorial system, skill tree functionality, support for multiple special abilities, shop inventories, player chest inventory, the itemization system, new keys and keycard system, new guns and ammo system, quest reward system, quest flavor text system, a bunch of work on making non-randomized quests really easy for me to create, the world tier system for difficulty scaling, a system for claiming land, the system for butler bots cleaning up and replacing broken walls and objects, a system for having new NPCs move in to replace the dead ones, new shaders to do unsexy things that you probably won't notice, the entire in-game user interface, fixing up the level editor so it'd be smooth sailing for my level designer, mutator integration, work on the build mode integration, dungeon integration into the overworld, dungeon generation algorithms, new mayor functionality, proper texturing of the world map, integration of thousands of new art and sound assets, integration of hundreds of new chunks, the dynamic music system, local co-op and online multiplayer development, helping with the new localization, demo-specific functionality, hundreds and hundreds of bug fixes, a bunch of optimization work, and just tons and tons of odds and ends, and that is really only scratching the surface. And outside of directly working on the game, I provided help on the Streets of Rogue Switch physical release. I helped on the China-only mobile release of Streets of Rogue. Yes, that is actually a thing. I worked on potential tie-ins to other game properties. I worked on the trailers, made devlogs like this one. I read over 7,500 contest entries for last year's suggestions for Streets of Rogue 2 contest. I read pretty much any other feedback that got posted. I also worked on raising 2 children. So yeah, it was a lot. And as you can probably ascertain, all of those things really added up. Now you might have noticed there were a few key things missing from that list, namely content in the form of characters, abilities, items, specific quest lines, pretty much anything to do with moment-to-moment design and game balance in the game. There was a lot of work on major important systems, and getting those systems to function in harmony with each other, and those systems will be able to support all that future content and design work. But unfortunately, I was left with just not as much time as I would have liked to step away from the hardcore programming of systems and just focus on making the game fun. One of the core strategies that I've tried to employ throughout the development of this game is to basically create a solid base, and then work my way upwards. So the first thing I did back in 2020 specific to this game was to create systems for generating and displaying the large procedurally generated world, that could essentially handle anything from the original Streets of Rogue. And once that was working pretty well, I was able to move on to higher level systems like, NPCs being able to pathfind over large distances, the traffic system, the day-night cycle, NPCs having jobs and homes. There's a bunch of new systems and mechanics that I had wanted to add, that have been pretty solidified in my design docs for a long time now, and most of which at this point have been developed to some degree or another. So the idea was that once I have all this new stuff in place, this new structure, the world generation and all that, it'll be there to support the moment-to-moment gameplay, and all the systems that I've kept intact from the original game, which are already firing on all cylinders because they've been battle tested already, because they were already in the original game. So with all these elements in place, then I can go in and mess around and make relatively quick iterative changes and figure out what works and what doesn't, and adjust and ultimately whittle this thing down to have a really fun core game loop. And once that's in place, and that's a good place to support to start early access. And once we're in early access, then I can really focus on adding content and balancing, and then having feedback loop with the players, and probably fixing a lot of bugs, but hopefully nothing too game breaking, and just generally have a smooth time. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite reach that point as fast as I thought I'd be able to. Like I said before, when it comes to programming, it can be hard to predict how long something's going to take. Something that you thought would take 10 minutes could take 4 hours. Something you thought could take a week could take a month. Conversely, something you thought could take a month could take a week. It's less common though, and in general though, I'm kind of an optimist, probably a tad overconfident in my estimates. The original hope was to have a demo of Streets of Rogue 2 available in the June 2024 Steam Next Fest, which, if you don't know, the Steam Next Fest is like a Steam festival with a bunch of demos that get featured, new demos from games that are just going to be coming out soon. And then following that, we'd release the full game into early access in August. So about a month prior to that, TinyBuild and I had a couple of small-scale internal playtests that featured early versions of the demo that I released in October. And at that point, I knew that the game was missing a bunch of my planned mechanics and, still didn't have a ton of structure. But the question I really had was, is this current iteration something that people would enjoy enough as an early demo of an early access game that it piques their interest for the full version? And the feedback was in that general range. Like people liked it, but it was pretty clear to me that the game needed more time to bake because on top of the gameplay stuff, there were just too many showstopper bugs at that point. So we canceled the June Steam Next Fest demo and made the decision to release the game in October instead, and then put a demo in the October Steam Next Fest. And at the time, being optimistic, I was like, oh my god, this is so much time, this is a major load off, a whole 3 to 4 months or so. And to be clear, like I was crunching pretty hard prior to that point, and I continued crunching pretty hard after it, but to have that extra time felt huge to me. And I was really determined to make the October release date like come hell or high water. I mean, like I was on a mission. Well, around late September, early October, it became apparent that this just wasn't going to be possible. The plan was to have another small internal playtest and then have a large-scale playtest that anybody could join, and a ton of people signed up for that. And then after that, we would release the demo in Next Fest and then the full game. But I kept delaying the small-scale playtest because I didn't feel like the game was substantially different enough from the previous playtest version that having new feedback was going to do anything other than distract me from getting done what I needed to get done. So we finally had the small-scale playtest in early October, which was really late. I just kept delaying because I didn't feel like the game was ready yet. The pile of tasks I had to do just wasn't going down fast enough, and feedback on that playtest was improved, but it was still too similar to the previous playtest for my liking. And at that point, it was just too late to do the large-scale playtest that we planned before the next fest hit. And the whole thing was just starting to feel like a last-minute rush job. And while it might have been possible for me to like focus really hard in the right places and hack a bunch of stuff into the game to make it resemble the game I wanted it to a bit more, much like I hacked in gamepad support in under a day. Ultimately, it's just something I didn't want to do it. I didn't like the idea of doing it. It felt dirty. I felt like I should take the time to get it right. Was not comfortable releasing that way at all. So we decided to delay the game again. This time with the when it's done release date. But we did decide to also release the alpha demo into the Steam Next Fest to kind of tide people over a bit, let people know, yeah, it's still coming, it does exist. And unfortunately for this demo release, time was very much not on my side. Getting that demo out for Steam Next Fest was probably the most under-the-gun game development experience I've ever had. I was just like violently knocking off tasks and bugs for pretty close to 24 hours before it launched. Just like staying up at my computer. It launched like 2 hours before the Steam Next Fest started, so it was an all-nighter. I was making all these really quick, real-time decisions to just cut things left and right because they weren't working quite well enough. And at the same time, there was just encroaching dread of putting something out there that's not quite ready yet. Even if it's just a demo, it was still a big deal to me because, it's people's first experience with something that I've been working on for years, and it's not in an ideal state. So after that launch and I confirmed people weren't having major problems with it, I went to sleep for like 4 hours, woke up extremely sick, couldn't even look at a computer screen for hours without feeling nauseous, somehow managed to do a localization fix at like 2 a.m. the next night, but it took me days to fully recover from that, and I'd prefer to not do that ever again if possible. Streets of Rogue 1 was free for about a year and a half before it went into early access. I got a lot of really important feedback during that period of time, so I figured this demo could kind of fulfill the same role, and be a way to get feedback on the game before it came out into early access, so that I wasn't releasing something completely blind. But it was actually not a super easy decision to release that demo. First impressions are important, and it's essentially an alpha demo of an early access game that happens to be missing a lot and, has next to no real balance work done. It is a work in progress build, and on top of that, it's a build where the core game loop hasn't been totally firmly established yet. And I tried to communicate all this as best I could, in the Steam news article that released alongside the demo, in the message that appears when you start the game, in the tutorial pop-ups. And I think most people kind of got that. Like, the consensus has been, the game's good so far, but, keep going, it's not done yet. But, it's never fun seeing feedback where someone's enthusiasm for the game has been dampened because, something feels off, like it feels too easy, the pace is too slow, there's too much downtime, there's no point in building a home right now because it doesn't provide any important function yet. All that stuff is totally understandable, and it's completely warranted to have that kind of feeling. I don't expect everyone to be on game developer wavelength. It's like if a comedian tells a joke on stage and it bombs, and the comedian's like, well, actually, you just didn't get it. Like, no, come on. Like, if you took the time to play something and, you didn't have a great experience, then you didn't have a great experience. But to anyone who was underwhelmed by the demo, just know that, I get it, and I agree with most of your feedback. I've probably read like 95% of the words written about this game on the internet. I'm very much on top of it. What separates a good game from bad isn't like the big broad strokes of the game's design. It's the little details that you don't necessarily think about, but you feel them. Basically polish. And generally what separates the games that have polish from those that don't is time. The universal thing about in-development games is that every single one of them, they all suck until they don't. I remember one example reading the post-mortem of the game Thief the Dark Project. And apparently that game didn't come together as a fun experience until the last couple weeks of development. So, there really is a fine line between a game being great and a game being like just meh. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't really see any of this as that big of a deal. I've been working full-time on Streets of Rogue and this sequel for nearly 10 years now. Fortunately, I still like doing it. Basically, I'm all in on this, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. The game is coming along fine. The only thing standing in the way of release is really just a bunch of tough puzzles on my computer screen that I have to solve every day, and a couple of small children who apparently need to be fed every day. The people working on the art and sound for this game have long since outpaced me, so there's no hold up there. Those parts of the game are in great shape. It really is just down to like me and getting the work done. So where I'm at right now is I'm going to release the game into early access when I feel it's ready for early access. There won't be any more release dates until it is 100% certain, but also in the interest of transparency, I am releasing a roadmap. For anyone who wants a better sense of where the game is at right now, or if you had concerns about anything in the demo, and you want to know more about how the full game is going to differ, this roadmap should answer a lot of your questions. I'd say it's more like part roadmap, part mini design doc. It's meant to be like really easily parsable and easy to reference specific things. We considered using Trello, but I thought that might be overkill. This document is fairly comprehensive, even if it doesn't get too specific. But if you think it's missing something, or you think that something hasn't been covered well enough, just let me know and I can amend it. This is going to be a living document, so check back occasionally if you want to know what I'm working on. I'm also going to continue pushing out updates to the alpha demo on Steam, so feel free to send feedback on those, or just skip it if you want to wait until it's a little bit more fully baked. Sorry about the lack of a release date. I hate to give a ballpark right now because obviously my predictions haven't panned out very well so far, but I suspect it won't be too long. And to anybody feeling disappointed right now, just sit tight. Game's coming. I get you. I've been in your position. When I was a youth, I was on the edge of my seat waiting for Daikatana to come out for like 2 years, and then it finally came out, and it was Daikatana. So it's probably not the best comparison for me to make here, not the comparison I wanted to make. Anyways, check out the roadmap. There's some interesting stuff in there, and stay tuned. It's going to be a fun year. Later, folks.